Alright everyone, buckle up, because this is about to be my biggest video of all time. After ranking every starter Pokemon of each type, it's now time that I rank every single starter ever. Now, if you don't already know, I take just about everything into account when it comes to these rankings. Of course, the starter's strength, both in-game and competitively, will be heavily considered, but I'll also account for their anime depictions and overall importance to the Pokemon franchise. Also guys, remember, this is ultimately just my own opinion, so be sure to tell me your full rankings in the comments section below. And without further ado, let's get started. The worst starter Pokemon of all time is Meganium. Meganium. I really have nothing good to say about you at all. Everything about this grass starter from Johto is just bad. Now Chikorita is without a doubt the worst starter to select for a playthrough, as throughout Johto, it'll have a ton of bad type matchups with gym leaders, the Elite Four, and even with all the poison types that Team Rocket uses. Similarly, in competitive play, Meganium has pretty much always been bottom tier. Its stats don't allow it to really thrive at anything, and really all it can kind of successfully do is set up screens and Leech Seed. Overall, it just has a very niche strategy without very much upside to it at all. Even the designs of the entire Chikorita line is pretty underwhelming too. It's really just this tiny plant dinosaur that gets longer as it evolves. I guess it also doesn't help that Meganium is sandwiched in between two of the greatest grass starters ever as well. I mean, the only really kind of positive thing that I could say is that I did indeed like Ash's Bayleaf in the anime. She was a super underrated Pokemon of his that he really should have fully evolved. But other than that, unfortunately, there's nothing. Meganium is just really bad in every single aspect. But here's hoping it receives a much needed buff in the form of a Mega Evolution in Legend Z-A coming this fall. Next, in 29th is Inteleon. Inteleon is really the only starter Pokemon which I downright despise. And I really think this hate mostly just stems from its design. Going into Generation 8, I was definitely a part of the Sobble squad, and I planned on using it on my in-game team. But then, we got to see the starter's final forms. And in my opinion, Inteleon is easily one of the ugliest designed Pokemon in the entire series. Its weirdly slim build just looks so awkward, and it honestly really missed the mark and pretty much ruined the entire Sobble line. I mean, it's based on James Bond of all things, and this gimmick totally comes out of nowhere, and by no means does it even slightly work. Although, unlike with Meganium, there are actually some good things about Inteleon. First, Sobble is arguably the best starter to use for a playthrough of Sword and Shield. It performs very well throughout the entire game, and it certainly matches up the best in the champion battle with Leon. Inteleon also has some very solid stats, and it can work pretty well as a speedy special sweeper. It even has a pretty solid move pool too, with a ton of versatility, even if it is kind of lacking any solid setup moves. But even with its relative prominence in-game and in battle, I simply cannot rank Inteleon higher almost solely due to its final design. I just hate it so much. Thus, it earns the second worst spot in this video. Then, we have Chestnut. Chestnut is just one weird Pokemon. Unlike the last two starters, I don't totally hate Chestnut. Actually, as a matter of fact, I really like Chespin and find its design to be pretty charming. But then Quilladin and Chestnut's designs are both abominations. But what really hurts Chestnut the most is that it is far and away the least popular Kalos starter. Obviously, Greninja casts a massive shadow over it. But then, even Delphox has a decent amount of fans. Plus, it was Serena's signature Pokemon, and she has become a massively popular character over the years. Meanwhile, Chestnut has kind of become an afterthought. Besides its unappealing design, I really think what holds Chestnut back from even being decent is its prowess in battle. because it just kinda stinks. The grass and fighting typing don't work all that well together. It has 6 total type weaknesses, which includes a 4 times weakness to flying, which is the second most abundant typing in the entire game. You also really shouldn't pick Chestnut in X and Y, and most probably didn't, as it'll only have 1 good type matchup in all of the big battles in the entire game, and that doesn't even come till the Kalos League against Elite 4 member Seabold. In closing on Chestnut, it really just seems like it never had a fair chance to thrive. It'll forever be the least popular Colossian starter, and overall, it's just incredibly underwhelming. Fittingly enough, in 27th is Delphox. Much like Chestnut, Delphox is pretty ugly, but unlike Chestnut, Delphox is actually kind of good in battle. When we take a look at its stats, both its specials and speed are very solid. It also has a relatively good move pool, with access to moves like Mystical Fire, Psychic, Grass Knot, Shadow Ball, and even Will-O-Wisp. So that means, all in all, I can honestly say that Delphox is pretty underrated when it comes to battle. Then in the X and Y games, it actually performs pretty well there too. It will thrive in the gym battles against Viola, Ramos, and Wolfric. And the same can be said against Wickstrom in the Elite Four. But it is still only the second best Kalos starter, and it is vastly behind and vastly overshadowed by Greninja. Overall, it's not that Delphox is all that bad. I just really believe that it is the worst fire starter ever, and it just feels a tad bit underwhelming, while also easily being one of the worst designed starters ever. Then we have Samurott. Samurott is a Pokemon that legitimately had so much potential, and honestly, I originally thought that I would end up ranking it much higher. But the harsh truth is that it just really isn't all that good. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't really think that any of the Unova starters are all that great. But Samurott solidifies itself as the worst of the Gen 5 bunch for a couple of reasons. The first being its final design. Now, I do kinda like Oshawott, even if it seems like a bit of a Piplup ripoff. And then as for Duat, it's great, and amongst the best of the starter middle stagers. But Samurott just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. I don't really get it at all. And its whole little samurai gimmick just seems so forced too. The other massive problem with Samurott is that it is just not good at all in battle. Actually, it's really bad. And besides Meganium, it might just be the worst starter ever when it comes to battling. Its stats are absolutely all over the place, and it really isn't particularly good at anything. It has an alright physical attack, but it just doesn't have the proper move pool to complement it. And now, by modern meta standards, Samurott has just become so obsolete. Now, Oshawott is also the worst starter to use in any of the Unova games. In both the originals and sequels, the only good matchup the Oshawott line will ever have is against Clay. And mind you, the other two Unovan starters will also have a typing advantage over him too. And that's not even to mention that there are loads of objectively better water types in Unova too. All in all, it's a bit frustrating how underwhelming Samurott is. I really want to like it, but it's nearly impossible for me to do so. Now, in 25th is Emboar. Emboar is a Pokemon that has recently grown on me. Now, a couple years ago, I probably would have put it at 29 or 30, but now, I simply just don't hate it as much as I used to. I still don't find it to be all that great, but I can at least say that there are some things that I really do like. First, I think Tepig is adorable. It's easily one of the cutest and overall best designed starters of the entire collection. Second, I can definitely admit that Emboar can hit really hard. Its base attack stat is massive, and moves like Superpower or Flare Blitz will allow it to hit like a truck. Finally, I genuinely believe that Tepig is indeed the best starter to use in either set of the Unova games. It has a solid amount of type advantages throughout those games, and it performs the best against both the Elite Four and in the champion battles. But that's about it as far as the good goes for the Tepig line. As I said, I like Tepig's design a whole lot, but I do find Pignite and Emboar to be horrendous looking. Plus, Emboar is literally the third fire and fighting starter in a row, and it is definitely the worst of the three. It just comes across as frustratingly redundant, and comparatively, it just looks so bad. Next up is Hisuian Decidueye. Now, we're entering the part of the video where I now at least kind of like every single starter moving forward. And here we begin with Hisuian Decidueye. Hisuian Decidueye honestly had some real potential to be great, but I can't help but feel like it ended up being a little underwhelming. The biggest fault with Hisuian Decidueye is that it's just so-so when it comes to battling. It does have a very powerful signature move in Triple Arrows, which is solid in PLA and really good in Scarlet and Violet. It's just, its typing and stats really do it no favors. Nothing here statistically really jumps off the page at you, and by no means is this thing tanky enough to get away with it being that slow. Then also, as we saw with Chestnut, the grass and fighting typing just isn't all that good together. Now, I still can't appreciate this Pokemon for what it is. However, just due to its underwhelming prowess in battle, I just can't rank Hisuian Decidueye any higher. Taking 23rd is Quaquaval. Quaquaval is definitely one polarizing starter. Some people adore it, and others just hate it. This is mostly due to its flamboyant personality, and yeah, I agree. I definitely don't love it. And in battle, its weird dancing can be super distracting. I know for me, I instantly fell in love with Quaxly when it was first revealed to us. But then, once I saw Quaquaval, I was very disappointed. Quaxly had so much potential, but this weird final design came out of nowhere and ruined the entire line. But even with me saying that, there is no denying Quaquaval's power in battle. At a first glance, its stats might not seem that great, but with access to Moxie as its hidden ability, it will get stronger after each KO, and that'll pair perfectly with its signature move Aqua Step, which hits hard for some solid water stab, but it also raises its speed after each attack. This makes it one very powerful physical sweeper that'll allow it to quickly snowball through teams. Quaxly is also a relatively good Pokemon to use in Scarlet and Violet. Overall, I can definitely see the good in battle with Quaquaval, even if its final design is just bad. Next up is none other than Typhlosion. However, I am not gonna allow for nostalgia to blind me. I think Typhlosion is good, just good, and that's fine. Originally, Typhlosion was a very solid Pokemon, but it just hasn't aged all that well. I mean, we all know how dirty Typhlosion was done when we entered the 3D era, and it was also around that time that it really began to fall off hard from a battling perspective. Its biggest problem is that there really isn't that much to it when it comes to battling. As a mono fire type, it can hit hard with moves like Eruption, Fire Blast, or even Flamethrower. But that's about it. It really has no versatility or coverage. Sure, it does get access to moves like Earthquake and Thunder Punch, but those don't really do much for it, as Typhlosion's physical attack stat is kind of garbage. In that same vein, Ash's Cyndaquil and then his Quilava was good, but almost just as underwhelming. I would have loved to see Ash fully evolve it into a Typhlosion, and allow it to fully take the mantle of his true ace of Johto. To wrap up this entry on Typhlosion, it's good, and it sure is nostalgic, but it just hasn't aged all that well. In 21st is Rillaboom. Rillaboom is without a doubt my favorite of the Galarian starters. From Grookey all the way up to Rillaboom, I think they all have cute and charming designs. I am definitely not the biggest fan of that random drum that Rillaboom just spawns in out of nowhere, but whatever. All of the Galar starters are weirdly gimmicky, and I guess this is Rillaboom's thing. Similarly, I don't really think Rillaboom is that great for a playthrough of Sword and Shield, I mean, it's still relatively good, but it's definitely the worst option of the three from Galar. But even with that being said, Rillaboom might be one of the most OP starters ever from a competitive battling standpoint. It just has a ridiculous amount of tools in its kit that make it super fun to use in battle. Both in VGC and in singles, it has found a ton of usage, with its Grassy Surge ability pairing well with Grassy Glide, as well as with its solid stats. It can actually be a great bulky attacker. Also, I have to talk about Leon's Rillaboom from the Pokemon Journeys anime. That thing was an absolute monster, and was without a doubt one of the most OP Pokemon we have ever seen in the anime. It caught a ridiculous amount of bodies during the Masters 8 tournaments, and it was borderline unfair. All in all, I can appreciate the Grookey line for what it is. I also think that Rillaboom can be surprisingly good in both types of competitive play. I just wish it didn't have that gimmicky drum. Next, we enter the top 20 now with Cinderace. I honestly feel very similar about Cinderace as to how I feel with Rillaboom. It's good. Definitely nothing amazing, but by all means, very good. While I certainly don't like Cinderace's final design as much as Rillaboom's, Cinderace is still able to excel in other aspects. The first being, Cinderace has definitely received a whole lot more attention and special treatment than any other Galarian starter. It was Go's signature Pokemon in the anime, and as such, it appeared in nearly every episode of Pokemon Journeys. I also definitely think that Cinderace has one of the coolest Gigantamax forms in the entire game. That massive fireball it stands on and kicks is just so sick. But I think what really makes Cinderace special is its versatility in battle. Sure, it certainly has one of the most powerful signature moves in Pyro Ball, but it does also have access to moves like U-Turn, Scorching Sands, Will-O-Wisp, High Jump Kick, Sucker Punch, and then even Gunk Shots. And with its signature Libero ability, it can pretty much change into whatever type it wants, allowing it to be nearly impossible to predict in battle. Knowing this, it shouldn't come as that much of a surprise to learn that Cinderace, since its introduction back in Generation 8, overall making for one very solid Pokemon. Then, we have Hisuian Typhlosion. It really seems like Hisuian Typhlosion, competitively speaking, it outclasses it in just about every aspect imaginable. With its added ghost typing, it now has much more versatility, while also gaining a wildly strong signature move with its Infernal Parade attack. It also hits a bit harder than the Johtoian form, as it boosts a slightly bigger special attack. When talking both competitively and in Legends Arceus, Hisuian Typhlosion will always perform very well. It is actually a ton of fun to use in Legends Arceus, and it can be sneaky good too, especially in that final battle with Volo. The only thing that I don't like about Hisuian Typhlosion really is its design. It does come across as kind of goofy, and it also looks like a Typhlosion that blazed up some of that oddish green. But other than that, I really like this Pokemon and view it to be a massive upgrade from its base form. Now in 18th, is actually Meowscarada. Putting Meowscarada this high really might come as a surprise to many, but the more I thought about it, the quicker I came to realize that it is actually a really excellent Pokemon. I know earlier I said that Rillaboom was great for being a grass type, but honestly, Meowscarada takes it to a whole nother level. When we do look at its stats, the first thing that jumps off the page at you is that ridiculous speed. With it coming in at an impressive base 123, that does indeed make it the fastest starter Pokemon ever. Then, with its solid attack stat, it can work exceptionally well as a physical sweeper. It even has Protean as its hidden ability, which really does help it out a ton, and can save it from that crippling bug weakness that it could theoretically have. I've also loved seeing Meowscarada take center stage in the Horizons anime, as it is the signature Pokemon of Liko. It's been great to see it grow alongside Liko throughout the series, and I'm very excited to see what more is to come from these two. But, and I know I've said this about pretty much every other modern starter, it just doesn't necessarily stick the landing with its final form. I do believe Sprigatito is a great design first stager, Then, Florigato is particularly well designed, especially by middle stage standards. But yeah, you know what I'm gonna say here. The final design of Meowscarada is a bit weird. It's just a bit too busy and much too humanoid. Don't get me wrong though, it's not awful, it's just not as great as it could have been. Plus, a lot of weirdos on the internet have kinda ruined it for me too. Next up, we have Torterra. Torterra is a Pokemon that I've pretty much adored since day one. Unsurprisingly, most of my love for this starter just comes from its design. It just looks so sick. Seeing as it is known as the Continent Pokemon, its design perfectly embodies this nickname, and I truly believe it to be one of the best designed Pokemon in the entire franchise. However, I can't let my love for its design skew my rankings. This is because Torterra hasn't always been that great in battle. Due to its lackluster stat spread and its abundance of weaknesses, this Pokemon just hasn't found that much success over the years. And unfortunately, Turtwig is far and away the worst starter to use in any Sinnoh game. There's just so many better options in Sinnoh for both the grass and ground typing that Torterra is just a little obsolete. But even though it has had a really bad history in competitive play, now in Generation 9, Torterra is actually kind of good. Thanks to the terastallizing gimmick, it saves it from a multitude of type weaknesses. And now in Gen 9, it does have Shell Smash, which obviously is a huge help to both its speed and offensive stats. I think I should also make note of Ash's Torterra in the anime, but honestly, the less said about it, the better. To close on this entry for Torterra, I don't want it to seem overly negative, as I really do indeed like it. It's just its rocky history in-game and in battle that just really hold it back from ranking any higher. Next, taking 16th is Serperior. Serperior is just a starter Pokemon that does everything right. Its designs are all solid, from Snivy all the way up to Serperior itself. It does perform pretty well in both sets of the Unova games. And really, it's just a well-rounded starter by all means. I won't necessarily say that it thrives in any aspects, but that's totally fine. And that's kind of why it's right here towards the middle of these rankings. But I can confidently say that it is without a shadow of a doubt the best starter from the Unova trio. Really, it's just the least bad, and there's really no competition here either. I also think Serperior itself can be really fun to use in battle, specifically competitive battling. Its hidden ability is Contrary, and when it's paired together with a move like Leaf Storm, Serperior's special attack stat greatly rises after each turn, allowing it to essentially snowball through opposing teams. Because of that, it's always been pretty respectable when it comes to the competitive meta, and definitely one of the most prominent grass starters ever. Smack dab in the middle of these rankings is Feraligatr. Feraligatr is one vastly underrated starter. I can really appreciate just about everything with the Totodile line. I do have an especially soft spot in my heart for Ash's Totodile from the Johto series. Sure, it wasn't all that powerful when it came to battling, but it certainly had a fun personality. I also really like Croconaw too. For it being a middle stager, it looks really great, and I love its caveman toga. Then finally is Feraligatr, who I view to be a really underrated powerhouse when it comes to battle. It wasn't until the physical special split in Gen 4 that Feraligatr was really able to thrive in battle. This is, of course, thanks to its vastly superior physical attack compared to its lackluster special. And luckily enough, Feraligatr does get access to Dragon Dance, which allows it to become a great physical sweeper. I know personally, I always viewed the Totodile line to be the best starter to use in the Johto games. As I stated earlier, it'll obviously hit very hard, but it also boasts a fair amount of versatility, and certainly more than the other two Johto starters. Besides water moves, Feraligatr can use Ice Punch, Ice Fang, Blizzard, Earthquake, Crunch, Rock Slide, and as I previously mentioned, Dragon Dance, to make a lot of these moves hit even harder. But now, I just feel as if Feraligatr needs a little something more to further allow it to thrive, which would then result in it jumping up much higher in these rankings. But I do have a strong feeling that Feraligatr will end up getting a new and powerful Mega form in Legend Z. Then, in 14th, we're gonna go with Hisuian Samurott. Hisuian Samurott is far and away the greatest Hisuian starter in every way. When it comes to using one in Legends Arceus, it is an absolute monster. It'll match up quite nicely with pretty much every noble Pokemon, and it will definitely perform the best against Volo, especially since it has the typing advantage over both forms of Giratina, which gives you a huge leg up in what is arguably the toughest battle in franchise history. Unsurprisingly, it's also very good in competitive play. Its water and dark typing work well together, and its stats are pretty nicely distributed, all in all allowing it to be a pretty powerful physical attacker. Notably, Hisuian Samurott also has an incredible signature move in Ceaseless Edge, which will not only hit opposing Pokemon for massive stab damage, but it will also set up a layer of spikes after each attack. I guess the only minor nitpick that I have with it is that its final design doesn't really take any risks. This is because it's basically the exact same as normal Samurott, but with a darker headpiece. But regardless of minor cosmetics, it is still a great Pokemon all the same. Next up is the iconic Empoleon. We've been on a nice little run here with some of the best water starters in the franchise. And now, we have what is easily one of the most underrated starters of all time with Empoleon. The first aspect of this Pokemon that I've gotta highlight is its design. I genuinely believe Empoleon is one of the cleanest designed starters of the entire collection. Its Emperor Penguin look is pulled off flawlessly, and I just adore that trident crown it has. And honestly, the entire line is pretty well designed too. Piplup is an exceptionally cute first stager, and I really love the charisma and charm that Dawn's displayed throughout the Diamond and Pearl anime. Then there's Prinplup, which is, let's just say, okay at best. But yeah, Empoleon is a final stager that not just sticks the landing on its design, but totally goes above and beyond. Then, when it comes to a battling perspective, Empoleon has always worked very well on the defensive side of things. It is pretty evident of that based on its stats, but it also boasts one of the best defensive typings in the entire game. It also has a relatively solid move pool as well, with access to an abundance of water-type moves, as well as attacks like Ice Beam, Blizzard, Stealth Rocks, Toxic, and Flash Cannon. It makes for one pretty versatile Mon, and without a doubt one of the most underrated starters in the entire series. Then, coming in at 12th, we have Skeledirge. This pick might kinda seem like a surprise to many. I know I can kind of come across as a hater of most modern starters, but I definitely do gotta give Skeledirge its flowers here. I know I speak for us all when I say we all instantly fell in love with Fuecoco right when it got revealed. This cute little fire croc quickly became a meme, and as such, it would become the most selected starter in Scarlet and Violet. And when it comes to using the Fuecoco line in Palldea, there honestly might not be a single starter that is more OP in its native region. This is mostly due to Fuecoco having a typing advantage over 6 of the 8 gym leaders, as well as having the advantage over one of the most powerful Elite Four members, and also over half of Gita's champion team. In all honesty, Fuecoco might just be the most OP starter to use in its own region in all of Pokemon history. But it's not just simply type matchups that make Skeledirge a beast. Let's take a look at its stats. And while nothing really jumps off the page, it's honestly its moveset that really allows it to thrive. Its signature move Torch Song will raise its special attack after each turn. It can then also use moves such as Shadow Ball, Will-O-Wisp, Earth Power, Hex, and even Slack Off, which definitely helps solidify it as a prominent bulky sweeper. I also have really liked seeing the growth of Roy's Fuecoco and now Crocolore in the anime series. I'm very excited to see if it'll end up becoming a full-on Skeledirge soon, as Roy continues his path as a Pokemon trainer. All in all, Skeledirge is definitely one of the best modern starters we have ever gotten, and it is also ridiculously OP to use in its own Palldea region. Then, up next is Primarina. I actually find a lot of similarities between both Skeledirge and Primarina. Much like Skeledirge, Primarina is an absolute force, both competitively speaking, as well as when it's used for an in-game playthrough of its own native region. Primarina is just about as powerful, as it will essentially have some type of typing advantage in every major battle in all of the Alola games. Meanwhile, competitively, it is just so good. It can legitimately do just about anything. Be a sweeper, be a wall, or even be a support Pokemon. And as such, it should come as no real surprise that it can be consistently found among the OU tier, solidifying itself as a greatly powerful starter. Honestly, the only bad thing about Primarina is that it is definitely the most feminine looking design of all of the starters. And I mean, I personally have no problem with that, but let's just face facts. Most Pokemon players are boys, and they will prefer a more powerful and masculine looking design. But still, it is an incredible starter and very underratedly powerful. Now in 10th place, we have Decidueye. Okay, so I won't lie to you. This selection is probably the most biased on this entire list. While I do appreciate Decidueye for what it is, and yes, it does have a really sick design, the truth is that it's not really all that good when it comes to battle. And honestly, Decidueye almost solely earns its spot on this list because of Rowlet. Rowlet is easily my all-time favorite first stage starter in history. It's so round and so adorable, and I just love it. And seeing Ash Ketchum use one in the Sun and Moon anime made me love it even more, as that thing turned out to be a literal god of the Alola region. I really feel like most of the Pokemon fandom also feels this same way too. I genuinely think that Rowlet is one of the few Pokemon ever to not have any haters and just be unanimously loved. I still like Decidueye a whole lot though. Its final design absolutely sticks the landing, and I think its Archer inspiration is pulled off subtly but still so well. I only really wish it was a tad bit faster so it could be infinitely better while in battle. Otherwise, yeah, it is kind of underwhelming in that aspect. But I still adore this line all the same. Up next is Venusaur. To put it quite bluntly, Venusaur has been instrumental in the success of the Pokemon franchise. I mean, Bulbasaur is literally the first Pokemon in the entire Dex, and possibly the first Pokemon that you ever laid your eyes on. Bulbasaur itself is just simply iconic, and surprisingly, it is the most dominant starter in any of the Kanto games. This is mostly due to its insane type advantage it'll have in the big battles during the early stretch of these games. And you'll be able to breeze through the entire game up until the 7th gym where you square off with Blaine. But similarly, I always loved Ash's Bulbasaur in the anime. We all knew that he always stood on business, and it would go on to be one of Ash's most iconic and most reliable Pokemon in his entire collection. Now obviously, when it comes to competitive battles, Venusaur has been everywhere in terms of strength and usage. It's always kind of had a role as a prominent wall. And well yes, grass types have never been that great of walls. Venusaur certainly breaks that stereotype. Venusaur was undoubtedly at its best during the Gen 6 and Gen 7 competitive era, thanks in large part to its Mega form. Mega Venusaur was nearly unkillable, with moves like Leech Seed, Toxic, Giga Drain, Ingrain, Protect, and even Sludge Bomb. It could be very frustrating to battle. And with its new Thick Fat ability, its two biggest weaknesses were then neutralized. Now Mega Venusaur was able to peak all the way up to the OU tier, and it would go on to be a very commonly used wall in the metagame. All in all, I simply cannot overstate Bulbasaur, Ivysaur, and Venusaur's importance to the entire franchise. It will forever be the first evolutionary line in the entire series, and overall an iconic starter. Fittingly enough, in 8th place is Blastoise. I've always had so much respect for Blastoise, and a bit of hate for it too, but in a good way. Now as a kid, I would always select Charmander as my starter in any of the Kanto games. And that then of course means that I would have such a hard time facing off with Blue's OP Blastoise in the champion battle. So all in all, Blastoise sent me back to the Poke Center many times growing up. But okay, much like with Venusaur, Blastoise is obviously an icon across gaming history. Part of this is thanks to it being the original water starter, and forever setting the standard as to what the archetype should be. But the other part is that Blastoise is the biggest and the largest. Seriously though, everyone loves Blastoise, and it really does just about everything right. In battle, it's always been very solid, both in-game and competitively, especially during the Gen 6 era where it got its new, powerful Mega form. And even now in the current meta, it is able to keep up and even thrive now that it has finally gotten access to Shell Smash, allowing it to become a very solid sweeper. Honestly, Blastoise has always been the most well-rounded of all of the Kanto starters. And I mean that both figuratively and literally. You just can't ever go wrong with Blastoise. I also always adored Ash's Squirtle from the anime. Sure, it was his weakest Kanto starter, but man was that thing cool. In closing, I really just like the entire Squirtle line. It's so well-rounded and just overall very likable. Next up, we have Infernape. Infernape is definitely a fan favorite as far as starters go. And this makes sense because this flaming ape is objectively awesome. I mean, it is inspired by Son Goku, which instantly makes it really cool. But Infernape is just as great in battle too. Its stats are very well distributed, allowing it to work as a pretty fast mixed attacker. And in the Sinnoh region, Infernape is definitely the most powerful starter to use in any iteration of the games. It's also like the only real fire type you can use in Sinnoh, which also gives it a massive leg up. But it still dominates in about half of the gym battles, as well as against Aaron of the Elite Four. I really believe, though, what makes Infernape so beloved was Ash's in the anime. During the Diamond and Pearl series, Ash's Infernape had one of the deepest, most layered, and emotional storylines the series had ever seen. And honestly, it might be one of the best storylines in anime history. So yes, in all, there is really just so much to love about Infernape. It has always been very powerful, and Ash's Infernape in the anime is simply iconic. In 6th place is none other than Incineroar. Now, Incineroar is arguably the most controversial starter of the entire collection. There's actually quite a lot to like about the Litten line, but there's also a lot to hate about it too. I guess we'll begin with the negatives. And it really just comes down to the final design of Incineroar. Both Litten and Torracat are unanimously loved first and second stagers, but to many, it seems like Game Freak really missed the mark with Incineroar's final design. And personally, I can kind of understand this opinion, as the wrestling gimmick comes out of nowhere, and it kind of just becomes weirdly humanoid too. But there is no denying that Incineroar is an absolute force when it comes to battling. Okay, so both in the Alola games, as well as in any single battle competitive meta, Incineroar is just solid. But when it comes to the VGC meta, Incineroar might just be the greatest Pokemon of all time. With access to incredible support moves like Fake Out, Parting Shot, Will-O-Wisp, and Snarl, as well as having the Intimidate ability, Incineroar can honestly ruin opposing teams. Knowing this, it should come as no surprise that Incineroar is consistently the most used Pokemon in every VGC World Championship. But that is far from it for Incineroar. As I'm sure you already know, Incineroar was surprisingly chosen to be in Smash Ultimate. And honestly, if you can make it into a Smash Bros game, then that kind of solidifies you as a gaming icon. And then finally, what's arguably my favorite thing about Incineroar was the depiction of Ashes in the Sun and Moon anime. it began its heartbreaking origin as a Litten who had lost its Stoutland father, only to then join Ash's team and ultimately go on to becoming the strongest Pokemon in all of Alola. It truly was a beautiful story, and in my opinion, Ash's Incineroar went on to become one of his greatest Pokemon of all time. And due to its incredible storyline, as well as its ridiculous strength in VGC, and then also its inclusion into Smash, Incineroar certainly deserves being called the 6th greatest starter of all time. Now in 5th place, we have Swampert. To put it quite simply, Swampert is just one amazing Pokemon. I mean, seriously, by all metrics, it's just incredible. From Mudkip to Marshtomp to Swampert, they all boast some nearly perfect designs. I mean, Mudkip is a memeable icon, Marshtomp is solid and even charming, and then Swampert is just one epic beast. When it comes to battling, Swampert has truly stood the test of time and has consistently remained a massive threat. It's pretty well known by now that Mudkip is certainly the best starter to use in a Hoenn playthrough, as it'll have a ton of favorable matchups. And honestly, Swampert can essentially solo the entire region with relative ease. Seeing as it is a water and ground type, Swampert will effectively only have one weakness, which is grass. And honestly, grass isn't oftentimes that good of an offensive type. And that's not to mention that Swampert does get access to loads of ice-type moves to counter them. It's thanks to its typing and really solid stat distribution that Swampert has always found success while on competitive teams. It was definitely at its best during the 6th and 7th generation, thanks of course to its awesome Mega form. Mega Swampert turned Little Man into one of the most busted Pokemon of all time. It could do massive damage, tank hits for days, and while in the rain, it could move really fast as well, ultimately making in for a nearly perfect Pokemon, and in my opinion, a top 5 starter ever. Next up is Blaziken. Blaziken is just one cool Pokemon. Everything about it just exudes aura and swagger. Now, Blaziken burst onto the scene many years back during the Johto arc of the anime. It was there that it went toe-to-toe with Ash's Charizard in what at the time was one of the best battles in the entire series. Ultimately, it did get the best of Ash's Charizard, and this was just one epic way to introduce the brand new fire starter from the upcoming Hoenn region. And in the Hoenn region, it turned out to be one very powerful threat. Choosing Torchic as your starter in any of the Hoenn games will afford you a relatively easy playthrough. It'll have the typing advantage over 2 gym leaders and then half of the Elite Four, as well as the champion in every game except for Emerald. And then when it comes to competitive battling, Blaziken originally started off okay, but then once it got access to its hidden ability Speed Boost, it became an absolute beast. But it shot up to a whole nother level in Generation 6 with the introduction of its insanely powerful Mega. With it, it became easily one of the most OP Pokemon of all time. And, unsurprisingly, it ended up being one of the few starters to ever be banned into the Uber tier of competitive play. With a simple moveset consisting of Protect, Swords Dance, Flare Blitz, and High Jump Kick, pretty much nothing in the entire Pokedex could effectively wall it. And then finally, we have Maze Blaziken from the Advanced series. These two together were simply iconic, and it turned out to actually have a pretty interesting story, even if it did spend a bit too long as a Combuskin. But all in all, I can easily say Blaziken is one of the coolest Pokemon of all time, and certainly the second best fire starter ever. Taking third is my all-time favorite Pokemon, Sceptile. My all-time GOAT of Pokemon lands here in third. Obviously, I adore Sceptile in just about every way possible. Honestly, prior to Sceptile, the grass starter was just okay, and it was definitely the least popular option of the 3, and certainly the least interesting. But then came Sceptile, and it instantly made the grass starter cool. I mean, its design is as good as it gets. It's sleek, memorable, awesome, and it still finds a way to keep it simple. And actually, the same holds true for the entire line. Trico is cute, and really everything you could want in a first stage starter. Then Grovyle is widely regarded as the greatest middle stager in starter history, ultimately making the entire line one of the best in the entire series. As for me, what really made me fall in love with Sceptile was Ash's in the anime. This thing was an absolute menace, and it is easily one of Ash's all-time GOATs. I mean, it would take down mythicals like it was its day job. And in my opinion, Sceptile definitely deserves a spot on Ash's all-time Ultimate Team. Meanwhile, in-game, Sceptile is really great. As you likely already know, Hoenn is the region with too much water, so the Trico line can pretty much mow down everything in any Hoenn game. The Trico line will end up having a typing advantage over 3 different gym leaders, all of Team Aqua, Glacia kind of, and then of course the champion and Emerald version. Obviously, all of the Hoenn starters are great, but there is a decent chance that Trico really is the best when it comes to a traditional playthrough, especially in Emerald. Meanwhile, competitively speaking, Sceptile has been great at some points, but then kind of underwhelming in others. Really, the only fault that one could ever place on Sceptile is that it has really fallen victim to power creep. Currently, it's not that it's terrible, but it's just had a bit of trouble keeping up with some of the hard-hitting or bulky grass-type Pokemon. Sceptile also kind of lacks any real versatility too. Sure, its Mega did give it a small buff, but it wasn't really on the same level of some of the other powerful Megas of that era. But who cares? Regardless of that, Sceptile is still my all-time favorite Pokemon, and it is definitely the best grass starter ever. Taking second place is Greninja. Now we're talking about what is easily one of the most important Pokemon to ever grace the series. Let's face it, during the end of the Gen 5 era, Pokemon was kind of struggling. A lot of fans seem to have ducked out of the franchise during the Black and White era, but then we got Greninja. And thanks in large part to this awesome ninja frog, many Pokefans, including myself, were hooked back into the series. There is legitimately just so much that Greninja excels at. First, its design is just great. The ninja frog look is pulled off quite well, and it is certainly unique and memorable. And in game, Greninja is without a doubt one of the best Pokemon ever, whether it be competitively or for a traditional playthrough. I mean, if you do choose Froakie, you are gonna breeze through Kalos. This is because it will honestly only ever have one bad matchup in the entire game, that being against Ramos. Meanwhile, it will thrive in most of the gyms against all of Team Flare, Malva of the Elite Four, and it can also pretty much sweep through Diantha in the champion battle too. Then in terms of competitive play, Greninja's Prime might have been the best we have ever seen from a starter. This is thanks in large part to its Protean ability. Thanks to its Protean ability, it was able to get all the way up to the Uber tier during Gen 6. And alongside its pretty powerful stats, it was a massive threat and a mainstay in the metagame. But what really sent Greninja into icon status was Ash's in the XY anime. The story of Ash's Greninja was absolutely legendary. It was arguably Ash's greatest Pokemon of all time, and it took place in some incredible battles throughout the series. Ash's Greninja also helped bring many fans back into the anime series, and that includes myself. Of course, with it also came the one-of-a-kind Ash-Greninja form, which essentially worked as a mega evolution for Ash to use during the series. But the form ended up becoming so popular that one generation later it got added into the mainline games. And there, it was absolutely busted. Once activated, it was pretty much like another mega form without actually having to use your mega spots. This was arguably when Greninja was at its absolute apex in the competitive format, and it was just so powerful and versatile. Finally, the last major pillar that I have to highlight about Greninja is of course its inclusion into Smash. It has been in 2 different Smash Bros games as of right now, which obviously further elevates its status as a gaming icon. So in conclusion, Greninja is without a doubt one of the most important Pokemon of all time. It is basically the face of the modern era, and it certainly added some much needed rejuvenation into the franchise. But of course, the greatest starter Pokemon ever is Charizard. I don't care how much you hate it, Charizard is definitely the most important starter of all time. And honestly, it might just be the second most important Pokemon ever, only behind the franchise mascot Pikachu. Seriously, Charizard transcends gaming culture and has officially become a fictional icon. Honestly, I'd be willing to bet that a good 90% of Earth's population knows who Charizard is, and that is just ridiculous. But okay, what makes Charizard so great? Well, obviously, it boasts one of the best designs in the entire series. It's simple, but also badass. And it's the entire Charmander line that's really well designed too. It seems like Charmander and Charmeleon get a bit forgotten about and overshadowed by Charizard, but they're both solid. Next, let's highlight what made me fall in love with Charizard, which was Ash Ketchum's in the anime. This thing was just epic, and one of Ash's most iconic and most important Pokemon of all time. It boasted one of the first real story arcs in the entire series, going from the meek and abandoned Charmander to the proud Charizard that originally didn't view Ash to be a worthy trainer of his power. But after a near-death experience, Ash was able to earn Charizard's trust, and ultimately, the two would go on to become a perfect team. Charizard definitely became one of Ash's best Pokemon ever, and whenever Ash would bring him back for a big battle, you knew it was always gonna be hype. So yes, Charizard has pretty much always been in the spotlight since the beginning of the entire franchise. And I haven't even mentioned all the special treatment it's gotten over the years. It's been on the cover of 2 different games. It's gotten 2 Mega Forms, a Gigantamax form, and pretty much every boss level trainer in the anime uses one. Similarly, in-game, Charizard has always been solid. While it actually isn't that good to use in most of the Kanto games, it is still definitely the most chosen starter. Then competitively speaking, Charizard has kind of been all over the place. It really wasn't all that great for Gens 1 through 5, but it became a monster in Gen 6. This was of course thanks to its 2 Mega Forms. Both forms were used pretty differently, but both were very strong, and with them came the element of surprise. Seeing as the opponent had no way of knowing which Mega it would become, it kind of always gave the user an upper hand in battle. Honestly, I could go on and on glazing Charizard, and maybe one day I'll make a video about its rise to greatness. But I think I've made my case clear as to why Charizard is the greatest starter ever. To put it simply, no other Pokemon besides Pikachu itself has been as instrumental to the success of the franchise than Charizard. Whether you like it or not, you've gotta respect it. Well guys, that's that. Those are my rankings of every single starter Pokemon ever. This is without a doubt my biggest video of all time, and if you stayed for the whole thing, I just want to say thank you. Please feel free to let me know your personal rankings in the comment section below. And be sure to check out the other videos on screen now for more Pokemon content. Thanks guys.